In the face of the growing horror in the Middle East, we are acting to keep alive the possibility of peace and a two-state solution. That means a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state. At the moment, we have neither. Ordinary people, Israeli and Palestinian.
Starmer's Palestinian recognition, political misjudgment or strategic gamble. Good evening, and welcome back to UK Connors, where we dissect the political machinery that drives our nation. If you're new here, do hit that subscribe button and join our community of political enthusiasts who demand more than surface-level analysis. Today, we're examining what might very well be Sir Keir Starmer's most consequential and potentially catastrophic diplomatic decision since taking residence in Number 10. The corridors of Westminster are buzzing with a mixture of disbelief and calculation tonight. Sir Keir Starmer, a man who built his reputation on methodical legal precision, has just made a move that has sent shockwaves through both the domestic political landscape and international diplomatic circles. His decision to formally recognize a Palestinian state isn't merely controversial. It's a political gamble that could define his premiership and reshape Britain's standing on the world stage. But here's what's particularly striking about this moment. This wasn't the calculated move of a confident prime minister operating from a position of strength. Rather, it appears to be the desperate maneuver of a leader cornered by his own party's internal pressures and declining public support. The polling numbers don't lie, and neither do the whispered conversations in the tea rooms of Parliament. Starmer's backbenchers have been restless, vocal, and increasingly demanding action that aligns with their activist base rather than pragmatic governance. The timing couldn't be more telling. When a prime minister makes such a significant international declaration, whilst his domestic approval ratings are in freefall, one must question whether this is statecraft or political survival. The Labour leader, once celebrated for his forensic approach to opposition politics, now finds himself attempting to manage the competing demands of international diplomacy, domestic politics, and party management. And it's becoming increasingly clear that these three elements are pulling in entirely different directions. What makes the situation particularly fascinating from a political strategy perspective is how it exposes the fundamental tensions within the modern Labour Party. Starmer inherited a party that had been reshaped by years of activist politics under Jeremy Corbyn, and despite his efforts to move Labour back toward the political centre, the gravitational pull of that base remains powerful. This recognition of Palestine isn't just foreign policy, it's internal party management dressed up as international statesmanship. The international reaction has been swift and, frankly, predictable. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's response was characteristically blunt, describing the move as absurd and simply a reward for terrorism. Now, one might dismiss Netanyahu's reaction as a predictable response of an embattled Israeli leader, but the sentiment extends far beyond Jerusalem. The families of hostages still held in Gaza have termed this recognition a betrayal of humanity, arguing that it rewards Hamas whilst innocent civilians remain in captivity. This brings us to a rather inconvenient truth that seems to have been overlooked in the rush towards symbolic gestures. Hamas, the organization that controls Gaza and holds these hostages, fundamentally rejects the two-state solution that recognition of Palestine ostensibly supports. This Iranian-backed group doesn't simply oppose Israeli policy, it opposes Israel's very existence. So we're left with a rather surreal situation where Britain is recognizing a state whilst the de facto government of a significant portion of that territory categorically rejects the framework that makes such recognition meaningful. The political calculation behind this move becomes even more questionable when you examine the coalition of countries joining Britain in this symbolic gesture. Canada, Australia, and Portugal, with a notable exception of France, hardly constitute the kind of international consensus that typically accompanies major diplomatic initiatives. It's telling that Germany, with its particular historical relationship with Israel, has not joined this recognition, nor has the United States, despite the Biden administration's own complicated relationship with Netanyahu's government. What's particularly concerning from a British perspective is how this decision fits into a broader pattern of reactive rather than proactive foreign policy. Since taking office, Starmer's government has often appeared to be responding to events rather than shaping them, and this Palestinian recognition feels very much like another example of that tendency. The decision seems driven more by the need to appease domestic political pressures than by a clear strategic vision of Britain's role in Middle Eastern affairs. The domestic political implications are equally complex and potentially damaging. Within the Labour Party, this move might temporarily satisfy the pro-Palestinian activist base, but it's unlikely to resolve the fundamental tensions that drive such activism. Moreover, it risks alienating Jewish voters who have historically been an important part of Labour's electoral coalition, voters who were only just beginning to return to the party after the anti-Semitism scandals of the Corbyn years. But perhaps more significantly, this decision raises serious questions about how Britain positions itself in international affairs more broadly. Recognition of Palestine, particularly at this moment, sends a signal that Britain is willing to make significant diplomatic moves based on domestic political considerations rather than strategic international objectives. This is the kind of approach that diminishes rather than enhances British influence on the global stage. The European context adds another layer of complexity to this situation. As pro-Palestinian demonstrations turn violent in Italy, with protesters clashing with riot police during a general strike, we're seeing how these symbolic diplomatic moves can contribute to real-world tensions and instability. The question becomes whether Britain's recognition will help calm these tensions or inflame them further. From a purely tactical political perspective, this move appears to be based on a fundamental misreading of both the domestic and international landscapes. Domestically, the voters who are most concerned about Palestine are likely to remain unsatisfied with symbolic gestures. They want concrete action that Britain, as a middle power, is simply not positioned to deliver unilaterally. Meanwhile, the broader electorate, dealing with economic pressures, public service challenges, and immigration concerns, may well view this as yet another example of political leaders focusing on international virtue signaling rather than domestic priorities. Internationally, the move positions Britain as a follower rather than a leader, joining a modest coalition of countries in what amounts to a diplomatic statement rather than a meaningful contribution to Middle Eastern peace. This is particularly problematic given Britain's historical role in the region and its aspirations to remain a significant global diplomatic player post-Brexit. The strategic miscalculation becomes even more apparent when you consider the limited leverage this recognition actually provides Britain in advancing Middle Eastern peace. Recognition without the ability to meaningfully influence the behavior of either Hamas or the Israeli government is little more than gesture politics on an international scale. It's a foreign policy equivalent of parliamentary virtue signaling. It makes the recognizers feel better about themselves without meaningfully advancing the cause they claim to champion. What's particularly troubling about this entire episode is how it reflects a broader trend in British politics toward decision-making based on short-term political calculations rather than long-term strategic thinking. The recognition of Palestine appears to have been driven by the immediate need to address internal Labour Party pressures, rather than a carefully considered analysis of how such a move advances British interests or contributes to Middle Eastern stability. This approach to governance, reactive, defensive, and driven by the demands of party management rather than national strategy, is precisely the kind of leadership style that voters rejected when they removed the Conservatives from power. The irony is that Starmer, in attempting to manage his party's internal dynamics, may be repeating the same mistakes of prioritizing political survival over effective governance that characterized the final years of Conservative rule. The international community will be watching carefully to see how this recognition plays out, not just in terms of its impact on Middle Eastern politics, but as an indicator of how post-Brexit Britain intends to conduct itself on the world stage. The early signs are not encouraging. Rather than demonstrating the kind of principled, strategic thinking that might justify Britain's continued aspirations to global influence, this move suggests a country more concerned with domestic political management than international leadership. The timing of this announcement, coming as it does whilst hostages remain in captivity and Hamas continues to reject fundamental compromise, sends a message that Britain is willing to reward intransigence if doing so serves domestic political purposes. This is not the message of a serious international actor, but rather of a country that has allowed its foreign policy to be captured by domestic political considerations. As we watch the situation unfold, the question isn't just whether Starmer's gamble will pay off politically, it's whether Britain can maintain its credibility as a significant international player whilst making foreign policy decisions that appear to be driven primarily by internal party politics rather than strategic national interests. The recognition of Palestine may well prove to be a defining moment for Starmer's premiership, but not necessarily in the way he intended. Rather than demonstrating decisive leadership, it may come to symbolize the dangers of allowing domestic political pressures to drive international policy decisions. Britain deserves better than foreign policy by focus group, and the international community expects more from a country that aspires to continued global influence. Time will tell whether this decision proved to be a strategic masterstroke or a costly political miscalculation, but the early indicators suggest that Starmer may have made a move that satisfies neither his domestic critics nor his international partners, the worst of both worlds in political terms. This is a reality of modern British politics. Complex, consequential decisions being made not based on their merit or their contribution to national interests, but on their perceived ability to manage short-term political pressures. It's an approach to governance that may provide temporary relief but rarely leads to lasting solutions. That's our analysis for tonight. The Palestinian recognition saga is far from over, and its implications will continue to reverberate through British politics and international relations for months to come. What do you think about Starmer's decision? Was it a necessary diplomatic move or a costly political miscalculation? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incisive analysis of the political decisions that shape our nation. Until next time, this is UK Connors, cutting through political noise to bring you the analysis that